Chris Farley is not funny.
No.
He's a bad actor.
Yeah, but on the other hand, he doesn't have a chance with this script, which is totally...
I have never seen him be funny with any script.
Okay, well, maybe
He just runs around, screams, and rolls on the ground like a fat man.
This movie is very, very bad.
In 1996, already struggling with feelings of depression and doubts about his abilities as an actor and comedian, Chris Farley was dragged through the mud for his performance in the movie Black Sheep.
What awaits of the talent of Chris Farley and David Spade, too.
He's a naturally funny
yes,
guy, and I wanted to laugh very much at this movie, but there are only groans, no laughter here at all.
The film was, as producer Lorne Michaels put it, an act of desperation by Paramount to replicate the success of Tommy Boy, which did modestly well at the box office despite the fact that it was severely underpromoted and only shown in theaters within the US. And although Black Sheep was a solid second outing for Spade and Farley that some even prefer over Tommy Boy, those closest to Chris point to this movie as one of the biggest catalysts for the multiple drug and alcohol relapses that led to his passing less than 2 years after its release. In today's episode, we'll be discussing all of that and more as we look back on Black Sheep.
Mike Donnelly. Understanding him is hard. Controlling him...
Promise me you'll stay right here?
...may be impossible. Oh my God! Black Sheep, rated PG-13. Now playing in theaters everywhere.
In April of 1993, just as SNL's 18th season was coming to a close, Paramount Pictures signed a deal with Chris Farley and David Spade, which granted them co-starring roles in 2 big-screen comedies. Now, this deal did not come to fruition because of their incredible on-screen chemistry or any collaborations they had done on SNL up to that point. Lorne Michaels simply saw the way that David and Chris interacted around the SNL offices, constantly ribbing each other in a friendly manner, and wanted to figure out a way to capture that dynamic on the big screen.
But the under 5 crowd seems to love them.
The fact that one of the movies in this deal ended up being made, let alone 2, is nothing short of a miracle. Tommy Boy, which was originally titled Billy the Third, a Midwestern, wasn't even fully written when filming began.
We started with 66 pages. We had no second half of the movie. We had no idea.
You started
how it
filming
ended.
with only 66 pages done.
Yep.
But the improv skills of Chris and David, combined with the writing talents of Fred Wolf, resulted in one of the most beloved comedies of the 1990s that people are still talking about nearly 30 years later.
Oh, son of a...
By April of 1995, the 2-year window on that 2-picture deal was coming to a close, and a follow-up to Tommy Boy had yet to be written. So Paramount turned to Fred Wolf to write up a draft screenplay, threatening to sue him if it wasn't completed before midnight on Sunday, April 30th, 1995. The significance of that date being it was the day that Chris Farley was allowed to get out of his contract with the studio, which he was eager to do because Chris was at the time being eyed for the part of Amish Boy in Kingpin. Meanwhile, Columbia Pictures was interested in making him the star of an up-and-coming, light-hearted buddy comedy called The Cable Guy.
You'd be surprised how many customers treat me like snot, like I'm a goddamn plumber or something.
But the 45-page Black Sheep script Fred Wolf came up with in just a few days didn't impress Farley all that much. While he was willing to eventually do the movie, Farley wanted Paramount to push back production on Black Sheep until summer of 1996, so that in the meantime, himself, David, and Fred could punch the script up a bit before production began. And of course, he could go off and do either The Cable Guy or Kingpin. Unfortunately, now that they realized just how bankable Chris Farley was, Paramount put extreme pressure on him to shy away from both of those roles. But even if he had gotten his way and Black Sheep had been pushed back, a starring role in The Cable Guy never would have happened. By that point, Columbia Pictures went behind Chris's back and promised Jim Carrey $20 million for the role. And on top of that, the studio essentially paid him not to star in the movie. But David Spade was convinced that, much like their experience on Tommy Boy, they'd be able to punch up Black Sheep as it was shooting with improvised jokes and rewrites by Fred Wolf during production. The combination of David's reassurance and pressure from Paramount was enough to convince Chris to push everything else aside for Black Sheep. But any plans of executing the movie in a similar way to Tommy Boy just didn't happen. Tommy Boy director Pete Segal was busy working on, ironically, a different comedy with a political angle, My Fellow Americans. So for Black Sheep, Paramount called upon Penelope Spheeris, who had experience working with SNL talent, including Chris, as the director of Wayne's World.
Next stop is St. Louis, and he's gonna come back through Chicago on his way to Detroit.
You know, for a security guard, he had an awful lot of information, don't you think?
After pitching the loose plot concept to Penelope, she wasn't really all that interested in directing it. But Chris told Paramount that he wouldn't do the movie unless they had a director lined up that he was actually interested in working with. Because they got along so well in Wayne's World, Penelope definitely fit the bill. So in a moment of desperation, they promised her a salary of roughly $2.75 million. Because Penelope was making more money than David Spade and Chris Farley, her decisions outranked theirs. So she immediately brought in 2 writers to gut the script completely and replace 40 pages with their own revisions, stating to Chris and David, "I know how to make you guys funny." To make matters worse, Penelope refused to hear Fred Wolf's suggestions, let alone speak with him. So he ended up being fired from the movie on 3 separate occasions. Paramount was desperate to get this thing made, and losing the director meant losing Chris Farley, so they pretty much let her have complete control of the movie. Chris would also, in his own spare time while shooting the movie, hold punch-up sessions with some of the writers who went on to do Almost Heroes. They would sit for hours trying to improve some of the jokes or bits he was going to perform when he returned to set. Even with those revisions, Chris's feelings on the film didn't change. He was not confident that this movie would be good, but according to those closest to him, he was going to go down swinging.
I'm all right.
Black Sheep revolves around the 1996 Washington State gubernatorial campaign between Al Donnelly and incumbent Evelyn Tracy.
Hi, ma'am.
Vote for Donnelly.
On Al's side is his oafish younger brother Mike Donnelly, who has a heart of gold but a brain thicker than mud honey.
Rock the Vote presents Mud Honey.
I didn't say mud, I said crud.
And his clumsiness tends to get the best of him.
Hello, Miss Onaker?
Realizing that his brother's involvement is only going to get in the way of a smooth landing for his candidacy, Al appoints campaign aide Steve Dodds to essentially babysit Mike for the remainder of the election.
Your brother told me to drop everything, come down here, and kind of get you organized for the final push for the big election.
Team Donnelly gonna kick a little Tracy butt.
The basic plot structure of Black Sheep is nearly identical to Tommy Boy. Lovable buffoon is saddled up with a straight-laced assistant whose main priority is keeping the buffoon in line. But the buffoon eventually proves everyone wrong by uncovering some sort of conspiracy and uses some kind of weapon to give themselves the opportunity to unravel the villain's devious plot. But those similarities were completely intentional, because with Tommy Boy, Paramount didn't know what they had. So they figured they could dupe the public into seeing another very similar movie that this time they would actually back with a decent advertising budget in hopes that it would explode at the box office. Between the two movies, I've always preferred Tommy Boy over Black Sheep.
Bullshit! How can it be bullshit to state a preference?
But Fred Wolf and pretty much everyone else who was involved with both films has stated that Paramount took way too much of a hands-on approach with Black Sheep. I'm guessing they asked for more scenes where Chris Farley screams his head off, no matter how stupid the setup. A good example being the moment where Mike gets his thumbs caught under the hood of his car. I'll admit, because it's Farley and he was just so damn charismatic, the scene still gets a laugh out of me. But not even a minute later, this moment is completely overshadowed by a much funnier physical comedy bit where Mike gets his tie caught in the trunk of an elderly couple's car.
Folks, having a little trouble here. Help, please!
He must be all hopped up on crack cocaine.
As much as I love that scene, it was moments like these, which Chris referred to in a self-deprecating way as Fatty Falls Down,
The fatty falls down, go boom. Everybody goes home happy.
that caused his confidence to take a big hit and made him question his worth as a comedic actor.
Chris would say things like, "Do you think people would still like me if I wasn't fat?" And I'm like, of course they would. You're funny. You're a great actor. You're charming. You're lovable. They would love you no matter what. And he goes, no, they only like me because I'm fat.
Chris Farley's size wasn't what made him funny. His delivery, timing, and hilarious facial expressions were the qualities that made him so entertaining to watch. And when it came to capping off physical humor with a genius line of dialogue, he was one of the best to ever do it.
What in the hell was that all about?
Like, crashing his truck into a theater marquee while screaming at the top of his lungs is funny and all, but the line he delivers after that just makes the entire scene so much better.
What the hell is a marquee doing here? It's crazy.
Some other standouts include the scene outside of the convenience store where Mike promises he'll stay in the car and behave, but instead gets photographed buddying up with a bunch of stoned teenagers.
Smoking, snorting, shooting, sucking.
But the funniest segment overall, for me at least, is Rock the Vote. Mike getting high with a bunch of reggae guys and then suddenly turning into a philosopher is so good.
You guys are the victims of a tyrannical, racist, oppressive society.
The Kill Whitey line might just be the most quoted moment within this movie.
Kill Whitey!
But the crowd reacting to Mike's passion for cupcakes and peanut butter cups just gets a laugh out of me every time.
You know what that's about?
And of course, anything involving Gary Busey, who played an unhinged combat veteran named Drake Savage.
I'm not that far from dragging you out of the car and beating you into dust.
But one thing that stands out about Black Sheep is just how many scenes Chris Farley and David Spade didn't appear in together. And that wasn't a mistake, because as much as Penelope Spheeris loved Chris Farley, she absolutely despised David Spade. She later stated, "I don't think I've ever even smiled at anything David Spade's ever done." Chris was lovable and positive, and David was so bitter and negative.
You're a smug, unhappy little man, and you treat people like they were idiots.
And the director's distaste for him was one thing, but David Spade claims that Chris once sort of hinted that he should exit the movie so that more time could be spent on the brother dynamic between Mike and Al, as Farley thought the movie would work better as a dramedy rather than an over-the-top slapstick comedy.
Do you want me to lose? If I really thought you believed that, I'd want to die.
Another thing that many people aren't even aware of is that Chris Farley had a pretty serious but rocky relationship with actress and model Lori Bagley. By rocky, I mean on again, off again, and, well, open. But you probably remember Lori from the pool scene in Tommy Boy. I guess Chris's pickup line actually worked.
You know where the weight room is? I'll check it out.
David later admitted that he felt betrayed by their partnership as he introduced them to each other and alleges that he was very close to Lori. David found out they were romantically involved completely by accident, which created even more tension on the set of Black Sheep. Chris would often return to the hotel room he shared with Lori during filming, venting, saying things like, "You're the reason me and my best friend aren't talking." As production wrapped on Black Sheep in September of 1995, Chris, already doubtful about the movie he just finished filming, also had to face the fact that he wouldn't be returning to SNL for its season premiere later that month. A new regime took over at NBC that, quite simply, didn't appreciate Chris Farley's comedic style. So he wasn't fired, but as Adam Sandler later revealed, both he and Farley were basically asked to quit the show.
Well, I love Saturday Night Live. I mean, it was the best thing that's ever happened to me, that's for sure. 5 years of a dream come true, you know?
By all accounts, in the later part of 1995, Chris had been clean and sober for over 3 years. But that all changed when, on his way to New York to do some post-production work on Black Sheep, Chris ordered an alcoholic beverage during his flight. That one drink quickly spiraled into a full-blown relapse of both drugs and alcohol. Penelope Spheeris alleged that when Chris was brought into the studio to record ADR, or automated dialogue replacement, he showed up an hour late and looked to be on something as he was very sweaty and his eyes were pinned. Around that same time, Paramount held a preview screening for a rough cut of Black Sheep in New Jersey, for which Chris was accompanied by his brother Tom. Tom recalls that before they left, Chris was lining his pockets with miniature liquor bottles from the hotel minibar. When he questioned him about it, Chris insisted that they were a gift for the limo driver coming to bring them to the screening. But it turns out that Chris was secretly drinking those miniatures during trips to the bathroom both before and during the screening because he was trying to drown out his negative thoughts on the movie. One of Chris's best friends and sobriety partners later revealed that he was extremely upset after attending that preview screening, telling her he fucking hated Black Sheep. It was just Tommy Boy 2, only worse.
This is a little more knockdown, drag-out comedy than Comedy Boy was, and we took out the story, plot, character development.
By the promotional stage of Black Sheep in late January, early February of 1996, you could just tell that something was off.
Do you think that David Spade and Chris Farley are the new emerging comedy team for the 90s?
I don't know about that.
Watching this alongside some of the interviews he did while promoting Tommy Boy, it's clear that his excitement for this movie just wasn't the same. Although Chris was able to put on a happy facade when he needed to.
Your hair looks really cool there.
I told you!
Wow.
David, does that poster make me look fat?
No, your face does.
Critical reviews of Tommy Boy hurt Chris's feelings enough, but this movie was viewed in an even worse light.
It's terrible. I mean, I enjoyed Tommy Boy a lot. I mean, I thought Tommy Boy had warmth to it. It had some real laughs. This film doesn't have a single laugh.
I also can't imagine how bad he felt when Siskel and Ebert not only tore apart the movie itself, but his performance specifically.
I knew John Belushi. I knew John Candy. He's no John Belushi or John Candy.
But Roger Ebert did at least try to vouch for Chris a few episodes later.
I think it's the writers that these guys are at the mercy of. I think Chris Farley can be very funny with the right material.
Well, which movie have you seen him in that was good?
I haven't seen a movie that I liked him in, but doesn't make him bad.
Me either. Me either.
Doesn't make him
Me
bad.
either.
God, what an asshole. But I do agree that with the right role in maybe a dramatic comedy of some kind, Chris Farley could have won the respect of people who didn't really enjoy his comedic style. I mean, his dramatic chops already improved so much in the short time between Tommy Boy and Black Sheep. The scene where Mike packs his stuff up after being fired from the rec center makes me so sad every time I watch it.
I love this job. I've been here since the place opened. And then they just...
But it seems like every movie he agreed to star in came with a constant barrage of negative criticism. Chris's friends and family tried to pressure him into just taking his time to pick the right roles, not just anything that came his way that promised a hefty paycheck.
You know, right after Tommy Boy, there were a lot of things offered to Chris because he kind of blew up. And the things that were offered to him, I thought were terrible. And he kept saying, well, do this with me, Pete, do this. And I said, it's terrible. And I said, no. And he got really upset with me.
It's been said many times by those who were close to him that he was a perfectionist who was extremely hard on himself. Amy Poehler said that after his performances at Second City, he would often stand backstage and berate himself if he felt he didn't do a good job. It was almost like he couldn't hear how loud everyone was laughing. Feelings of self-doubt, constant negative reviews, and the downtime Chris had in between movies, especially after leaving SNL, made for a perfect storm that just absolutely destroyed his sobriety progress.
When he went to movies, he would have 6 months of doing nothing, and that's when he would get into trouble. So when you saw the movies, he was clean and sober. Then the movie would be over, and he'd have downtime.
His relapse after shooting Black Sheep wouldn't be his last. But Chris's good friend and personal assistant, Ted Dondanville, alleges that it was the big one, and the rest were just dominoes. In all fairness, I don't think that doing Kingpin or a lighthearted buddy comedy version of The Cable Guy would have impacted Chris's life much differently, as those movies took similar beatings from critics that might have hit him just as hard. But it's possible that without the feeling of repetition from doing Black Sheep immediately after Tommy Boy, Chris might have felt confident to step into his first dramatic role sooner rather than never.
Is a dramatic role in the offing?
That would be nice. I would like that.
After his untimely passing in 1997, we never got the Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle biopic he was set to star in. But I truly believe Chris would have shined in that role. And that'll do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any thoughts on any of the topics discussed in this video or Black Sheep itself, leave a comment down below. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.